I can only remember it vaguely now. I was really young at the time, maybe 7 years old. Back then, in our old house, my bedroom wasn't on the same floor as everyone else's. It had its own floor, which always felt strange. The room wasn't even meant to be a bedroom to begin with. It was more like an add-on to the attic, or maybe a large walk-in closet that someone had decided to repurpose. The previous family who lived there had used it as a playroom for their daughters, but now it was mine. What unsettled me the most was the massive closet built into the far end of the room. It wasn't like a normal closet. This one was elevated, so you had to climb up a small set of old wooden stairs just to reach it. The door was one of those heavy sliding ones that always made a scraping sound when you moved it. The inside was stuffed, completely crammed with toys, boxes, and random childhood junk. It was chaos in there. And I was so little then, everything felt oversized and looming. Because my room was so far removed from the rest of the house, I often felt isolated. I hated how quiet it was, and that hulking closet sitting there in the dark only made the feeling worse. One night, after watching a scary movie with my family, I lay in bed nervous and wide-eyed. The shadows stretched strangely across the walls. I was doing everything I could to keep from looking at the closet door, when thud. The distinct sound of a toy falling over echoed from up inside the closet. I didn't hesitate. I leapt from my bed, my heart hammering in my chest, and bolted straight to my parents' room. I could barely get the words out, breathless as I told them what I'd heard. They both came to check it out, and after seeing nothing unusual, they told me there was no one in the closet. But they saw how shaken I was, so they let me sleep in their room that night. The next night rolled around, and the fear had mostly faded from my mind. I was drifting off when again it happened. Crash! The sound of a plastic container dumping its contents across the floor, Legos unmistakably scattering and clattering around inside the closet. I froze. For a moment, I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but I couldn't. I ran, just like before, straight into my parents' room. I told them it happened again, the Legos this time. My dad, clearly growing tired of what he thought was my overactive imagination, sighed deeply. Still, he gave in and let me stay in their room once more, though this time a bit more reluctantly. The following day, my mom and I checked the closet together. Sure enough, there it was. A pile of Legos spilled all across the wooden floor, right beneath the container they had fallen from. To me, this was clear proof. Somebody had been in the closet. But my mom just shook her head gently and said the container must have simply tipped over. That night, my dad told me flat out that I was sleeping in my own bed. He locked their door, saying he was done with what he called my nonsense. So I lay there, awake, silent, too afraid to close my eyes. The room was dead quiet, only the occasional creak of the house settling and the distant hum of wind brushing against the outside walls. My young imagination was spinning out of control, conjuring shapes in every shadow. I stared at the closet, and I waited. Maybe an hour passed, maybe more. Then it happened. The silence was shattered by a deep, grating rumble, the sound of the closet's sliding door being thrown open with sudden, deliberate force. My breath caught in my throat. Moonlight spilled through the window, casting a pale silver glow across the floorboards. That's when I saw it. A figure standing right at the top of the closet stairs, silhouetted in the light, unmoving. I screamed, not just any scream, a raw, unfiltered, blood-curdling shriek ripped from deep inside my chest.
I had never felt fear like that before. It was so intense, it felt like it had frozen my entire body. The figure jerked forward, then leapt from the elevated closet down to the floor with a heavy thud. It didn't pause. It turned and ran, straight out of my bedroom and down the stairs. Then came the loud slam of the front door as it was flung open, then silence. My mom burst into my room seconds later, panic written all over her face. My dad came rushing from downstairs, chasing after whoever it was. But he never caught them. And the police? They never found the man either.
When I was in 8th grade, our class went on a school trip known as the Louisiana Tour. It was one of those multi-day excursions meant to immerse us in state history, mostly visiting historically significant spots scattered across southern Louisiana. One of the final stops on the itinerary was Myrtle's Plantation, a place whispered about even before the trip began. People called it one of the most haunted places in the entire country. Ghost stories, legends, unexplained events, they all seemed to swirl around the name like fog. I wasn't sure what to believe back then, but I remember feeling a strange tightness in my chest as we pulled up to the old estate. It was the kind of place that made the air feel still, heavy even. Our group filed into one of the sitting rooms during the tour. There were about 20 of us, and the guide was speaking in that theatrical tone all tour guides seem to use, some story about the history of the house. I can't recall exactly what she was saying because, as I stood near the back of the room, something strange happened. At first, I heard it faintly, like a single note plucked from the air. A piano key. Just one. Ping. I turned my head slightly, my eyes scanning the room, expecting to see someone tapping a toy or making a noise with their phone. But there was nothing. No piano in sight, no instrument, no obvious source. Then again. Ping. Clearer this time, like someone pressing a key deliberately, letting the note ring out. I furrowed my brow, glancing at the floor, at the walls, still nothing. So I leaned toward my friends standing nearby and whispered, "Do you hear that?" They looked at me confused. "Hear what?" "That piano sound," I said, quieter now, more uncertain. "It's like someone's pressing keys." They exchanged looks, then shook their heads. "No, you're probably just spooked." Then, ping. "There it is again," I whispered, my voice rising just slightly in disbelief. But they just shrugged. No one else seemed to react. I turned away from them, now unsettled, and kept looking. That's when I noticed someone else wasn't watching the tour guide either. A woman, older, probably one of the parents from another group, was standing a few feet away, her eyes locked onto me. Her expression was calm, almost curious. Slowly, she raised her hand, pointed at me, and then tapped her finger to her ear. It took me a second, but then I understood. She was asking, "Did you hear it too?" I nodded, eyes wide. She gave me the smallest, solemn nod in return, like she was relieved she wasn't alone in it. And then, the tour guide's tone shifted. Her voice lowered slightly, as if leaning into something darker. She began telling the story of a Confederate soldier who had died in that very house. He was a musician, she explained, loved playing the piano, especially at night. According to countless guests over the years, people had reported hearing music drift through the house when no one was near the piano. Single notes, short melodies,
sometimes a tune repeating faintly in the dead of night. I felt my skin prickle. I looked over at the woman again. She wasn't smiling. She was just watching the tour guide now, quietly. Her son and husband stood beside her, completely oblivious, clearly having heard nothing at all. As the group began moving out of the room, I walked slower, letting the others pass until I caught up with the woman. "I heard it too," I said. My voice came out low, like I wasn't sure if I should say it. She looked at me, her eyes calm but serious. "So did I," she replied, 3 times, clear as day. Then she glanced toward her family. They didn't hear a thing. I nodded. We didn't say much else, but as I stepped out of that room, a chill slid down my spine. It wasn't just the cold air. It was the realization that some people hear things in that house, and some don't. And the ones who do, we never forget it.
It was getting close to Halloween, the time of year when the air turns cold and heavy with anticipation, and everything feels just a little more haunted than usual. My friends and I were sitting in a circle late one evening, bundled in blankets, trading ghost stories the way teenagers do when the nights grow long and the leaves start to die. That's when my friend, let's call her Sarah, said she had one. She hesitated, glancing around the circle with a nervous smile. "It's not just a story," she muttered. "It's actually true. It's about my parents, their first date." Immediately we leaned in. A real story? A creepy one involving people we actually knew? Sarah sighed. "I don't really like telling it, but okay." She told us her parents' date had started off normal enough, sweet but kind of awkward. Small talk, nervous laughter, nothing out of the ordinary. But as the night started to wind down, her dad, who was just a young guy at the time, had this sudden, spontaneous idea. "Want to go for a midnight hike?" It sounded romantic in a reckless, adventurous sort of way. Her mom agreed, a little hesitant but intrigued. He drove them up to Provo Canyon, said he knew the area pretty well from his rock climbing days. He was even friendly with a few local cops who patrolled the trails, so he felt comfortable going out there late at night. It was a new moon that night, which meant the sky was pitch black except for the glittering pinpoints of starlight overhead. No streetlights, no lanterns, just the crunch of gravel beneath their feet and the quiet hush of night all around them as they made their way up the path. They walked in silence for a while, just listening to the wind in the trees and the distant echo of night insects. But after a few minutes, Sarah's dad began to feel uneasy. The trail up ahead dipped beneath a canopy of trees, and that stretch of path was soaked in shadow. His steps slowed. Something about the way the dark pressed in there, thick and quiet, just didn't sit right. He shook the feeling off and kept walking. But then it returned, stronger. That electric, crawling sensation along the back of his neck, the deep, twisting instinct that something was wrong. Again, he ignored it. As they moved into the tree-covered section of the path, his foot struck something in the darkness. Something soft and unyielding sprawled across the trail. He froze. They both did. It was too dark to see what it was. No flashlight, no phone light, just a vague, sinking awareness that whatever he'd just stepped on, it wasn't a branch, or a rock, or a piece of clothing someone dropped. It was something else. The feeling hit him again, hard. This time, it was like every nerve in his body screamed, "Get out!" Without another word, they both turned and sprinted back down the trail.
Neither of them looked back. They didn't stop until they reached the car, their breathing ragged, their hands shaking. They didn't talk about it after that, at least not for a long time. Years passed, they got married, life moved on. Then, one night, they were sitting on the couch, watching an interview on TV. It was with Ted Bundy, the infamous serial killer. He was older by then, calmer somehow, like the weight of what he'd done no longer haunted him. A reporter asked him, "Was there ever a moment when you came close to being caught? A time when someone almost walked in on you?" Bundy paused. Then he smiled faintly. "There was one time in Utah, Provo Canyon. I had just killed a girl and left her body in the middle of the trail when I heard people coming, a couple. I barely had time to hide in the trees. I watched the guy walk right into the body. His foot hit it. He stopped. I thought I was done for." He gave a soft laugh. But then he just turned around and walked away. Sarah's parents didn't finish the documentary. They just sat there in silence, staring at the blank screen long after it went black. To this day, Sarah says her dad still dreams about that night sometimes, still wonders how close he came and why, of all the things, he didn't look down. My school's library stays open until 2 in the morning, mostly for people like me who wait until the last possible second to start their essays. It's not a huge building, but it has this basement area called the Stacks, where most of the books are kept. That place has its own kind of vibe, dim, quiet, cold. Just to paint a quick picture, there's a wide central staircase that leads down to the basement. At the bottom, there's a vending machine nook, and stretching from there is a long hallway. Off that hallway are 4 doors, each leading into different parts of the Stacks. The Stacks themselves are 2 big rooms on opposite sides of that hallway. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves everywhere, study desks along the walls, fluorescent lighting overhead that hums just loud enough to remind you you're alone. I was down there around 11 p.m. one night last year. I had this brutal, research-heavy essay due the next morning at 8 a.m., so I'd set up at one of the desks in the Stacks to avoid constantly trekking up and down the stairs. I'd been there a couple hours already. The place had mostly emptied out. By midnight, the only other person still down there was a guy sitting maybe 3 desks away. We never spoke, but it was nice not being completely alone. At some point, I hit that zone where you're panicking about a deadline, but too drained to function properly. I was trying to focus, flipping through some sources, typing nonsense, deleting it, repeating. Then I heard it. The sharp, rapid whip, whip, whip of someone flipping through pages, not reading, just flipping, fast and loud, over and over. It echoed from the far end of the room. At first, I tried to ignore it. I figured it was someone being annoying or maybe just skimming a big book. But after a few minutes, it didn't stop. They just kept doing it, page after page, loud as hell in that dead quiet room. Eventually, I snapped. I stood up, ready to tell whoever it was to knock it off. I took 3 steps toward the sound, and it stopped. Dead silence. Weird, but fine. I went back to my seat, a little rattled, but I told myself it was nothing. About 10 minutes later, it started again. Only this time, louder. Way louder. It sounded like someone was tearing through a massive textbook, pages flapping like they were trying to rip them loose. Even the other guy, who'd been totally absorbed in his work, looked up, clearly annoyed. He stood, muttering something under his breath, and started weaving through the bookshelves in the direction of the sound. It kept going, so I got up too. We didn't say anything, but we were both listening now, trying to pinpoint it. The sound was echoing less. It felt closer, like it had a physical location. We moved through the rows, slow, deliberate. He was on one side of the shelf aisle, and I was on the other, walking in parallel. The flipping was loud now, uncomfortably loud. It wasn't random anymore. It had a rhythm to it, like someone was doing it on purpose. We reached the far end of the row at the same time. Nothing. No one. We looked at each other across the shelf divider, both frowning. We hadn't seen anyone come into the stacks, and we were near the only entrances. If someone had come in, we would have seen them. There was no way around us. The flipping stopped. We just stood there for a moment. Then, wordlessly, we walked back to our desks. I sat down and stared at my laptop, trying to shake it off. I figured it had to be something mechanical, maybe a fan or air in the ducts. My brain tried to rationalize, but deep down, I felt off. The silence didn't last long. Flip, 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 flip. It started again. Only this time, it was right next to his chair. His head jerked toward the noise, eyes wide. No one was there, just the empty seat beside him and a row of books. He didn't hesitate. He shoved everything, books, laptop, cords, into his backpack in one frantic motion, stood up and looked straight at me. He muttered, "Fuck this," and he bolted. I didn't even grab my stuff. I was right behind him, practically sprinting up the stairs, heart pounding. Neither of us said anything on the way out. Ever since that night, I won't go back into the stacks after dark, even when other people are down there, because whatever made that sound, it didn't want to be found. It wanted to be heard.
This happened back when I still had my fishing boat, an experience so terrifying it stayed with us ever since. No matter how many years pass, I'll never forget it. My wife and I had taken off from the East Coast for what was supposed to be a peaceful 2-day fishing trip in the North Atlantic. Just the two of us, the sea, and the silence. The first day and night went exactly as planned. The catch wasn't spectacular, but it was decent enough to feel productive. That night, we relaxed inside the cabin, played a few rounds of cards, music humming softly in the background. It was calm, peaceful, normal. The second day was slower, barely any fish biting. The ocean stretched flat and empty in all directions. It made the hours feel long. We played cards again that night, this time without music, letting the gentle sway of the boat and the soft creak of the hull keep us company. Then, we heard it. A low, droning hum of a boat engine cut through the quiet, growing steadily louder. My wife and I locked eyes before rushing outside. Off the bow, we saw him, a lone man piloting a small, beat-up motorboat. There were no lights on his vessel, no lantern, no navigation lights, nothing. Just the faint outline of his boat drifting right in front of ours, cast in the glow of our deck lamp. He looked middle-aged, with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. I walked closer, still trying to be polite. "Hey, you're all right? Need any help?" I called out. He paused before answering, his voice flat and oddly calm. "You got any spare gas?" I shook my head. "Sorry, don't have any left over." I waited for him to explain. Maybe he was stranded, low on fuel. I offered, "If you're running low, we can tow you in or give you a lift back to shore." But he just stared, then said, "I got plenty of gas." There was a weird silence after that. A wrong kind of silence. My wife and I exchanged a glance, both trying to make sense of what he'd said. If he had plenty of gas, why ask for more? And then, the stare. He didn't blink, didn't look around, just stared at me, blank and motionless, face half lit by the glow from our deck lamp. His boat bobbed slightly in the waves, but he didn't move. The sea was silent around us, just the hum of the engine and his eyes on mine.
Finally, he broke the silence. "Have a good catch today?" His voice felt too casual, like he was mimicking small talk rather than having a real conversation. "Not really," I answered cautiously, trying to keep the tension down. Then I asked, "How are you navigating in the dark without any lights?" He let out a low chuckle. No answer, just that strange, hollow laugh, like I'd told a joke I didn't know I'd made. He turned his boat slowly, idling away from us, and called out one last thing. "Nice meeting you folks." Then he vanished into the Black Sea. We stood there in stunned silence, listening as the motor faded into the distance. My wife whispered, "I thought he was gonna rob us." As a fisherman, I'd met plenty of people on the water, traded stories, helped strangers, chatted with other boats passing by. But this? Something about him had felt wrong. The way he stared, how he came out of nowhere so late at night, alone, so far from the shore. No lights, no reason. Every part of it chilled me. I decided to kill our deck lights and quietly move the boat north just enough to put some distance between us and wherever he might be drifting. Call it paranoia, call it instinct, but it might have saved us. Around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a blood-curdling scream. My wife's. I shot up from bed, my heart hammering, only to see a man, that man, standing at the edge of our bed. For a split second, I was frozen. Then I lunged at him, but he moved fast, too fast. He was out of the cabin and gone before I even cleared the blanket. I stumbled into the doorway just in time to hear the sputtering of a motor starting up again, the same motorboat engine, revving hard as it tore away into the darkness. We didn't wait. We turned the boat around and made for shore immediately, speeding through the dark, our hands shaking on the wheel. We reported it that same night, told the harbor patrol, the Coast Guard, anyone who would listen. Descriptions, location, time, everything. But nothing ever came of it. No one ever found the man. No boat matching the description, no trace. We never learned what he wanted, or why he came back, or what he would have done if my wife hadn't screamed. But I still wake up some nights hearing the drone of that motor in the back of my mind, just outside the window, just beyond the light, and I know she hears it too.
The way my bedroom was set up, there was this one particular corner that always unsettled me. Directly across from my bed, tucked into the far wall, was a small alcove. During the day, it was nothing, just part of the room. But at night, that alcove turned into a black void. The reason was simple. My closet jutted out just enough to block any light, whether from the ceiling fixture or the faint glow of streetlights seeping in through the window. When the rest of the room dimmed, that corner became something else entirely. It was a night like any other. I was in my 4th year of high school, lying awake in bed, struggling to fall asleep. I'd tossed and turned for what felt like hours, and then that feeling hit me. You know that weird sensation you get when someone is staring at you? That creeping awareness like a spotlight on your back in a dark room? I felt it, strongly. The air in my room suddenly felt thicker, heavier. I tried brushing it off, told myself I was just overtired or imagining things, but the feeling didn't fade. In fact, it only grew worse. And what terrified me most wasn't just that I felt watched, but that whatever was watching me meant harm. Like its attention was vile, poisonous, cold. I opened my eyes slowly. My gaze, as if drawn by a string, was pulled toward that dark corner, the alcove that had no light. And I saw something. Not clearly, not like a person standing there, but a presence, a shape, a vague, hazy outline, darker than the darkness itself. It wasn't just my imagination, it had depth, like it was absorbing the black around it. Goosebumps spread across my skin instantly. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and stared again. Still there. I told myself it was just a shadow, a trick of the light. Maybe my mind was playing games with me. I closed my eyes, pulled the blanket higher, and tried to focus on breathing, slow, steady. In, out. But the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it intensified. The weight of that stare, malicious, unmoving, bore down on me like something tangible. My whole body was tense, every muscle coiled. Then I heard it. A faint creak, the unmistakable sound of a floorboard shifting beneath pressure. Someone stepping inside my room. I shot my eyes open. The shape was gone from the alcove, but now it was in the opposite corner of the room. Closer. I didn't see it move, didn't hear footsteps across the carpet. It was just there, like it had skipped across the space in silence. My heart nearly exploded in my chest. My instincts screamed louder than reason. I couldn't breathe. Without thinking, I grabbed my pillow and blanket and hurled them over my head, curling into the tightest ball I could manage beneath the covers. My eyes squeezed shut. I tried to block out everything, the room, the shape, the cold, my own fear. I cried silently under the blanket, tears of pure terror. All I could do was hope. Hope it wouldn't move closer. Hope it would lose interest. Hope I would wake up in the morning and it would be gone. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. And I know it wasn't a dream. Even now, years later, the memory brings chills racing down my spine. That feeling of being watched by something so full of hatred, stuck, like whatever was in that room hadn't left entirely. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night and catch myself looking toward that same corner, it feels like it's still watching.
It was the first time my family had ever gone camping together. I was about 12 at the time, old enough to know better, but still young enough to feel excited about the adventure. We probably wouldn't have done it at all if it weren't for my younger siblings, my brother and sister, who were still just 7 and happened to be twins. They'd been begging for a trip like this for weeks. It was mid-July, warm, breezy, the kind of summer night that feels like it could last forever. We drove deep into the countryside, far from the city noise and glowing lights. We didn't stop at any official campsite. That wasn't my dad's style. He pulled the car to the shoulder of a quiet, empty road, and we all got out, backpacks slung over our shoulders.
Then we hiked about a mile into the woods until we found a small clearing, a patch of flattened earth surrounded by trees on all sides. We pitched 2 tents, one for my parents, one for me and the twins. As night fell, we roasted marshmallows, told silly stories, and laughed under the stars. It felt perfect. Until it didn't. Later, after the fire had gone out and the forest fell into that deep, pressing quiet, we all crawled into our sleeping bags. My siblings were out cold in minutes, but I couldn't sleep. The sleeping bag was too thin, the ground too hard. I kept shifting, twisting, trying to find some way to get comfortable. Every little rustle in the trees made me flinch. The kind of silence you only hear in the woods, it started to feel heavy. Time dragged. Then I heard it. Zzz, zzz. The soft, unmistakable sound of a zipper being pulled down from the outside. I froze. I turned toward the entrance of our tent, heart already beginning to race. Someone was poking their head inside. I couldn't make out a face, just a vague outline. Shoulders, a head, a flash of movement. "Dad?" I whispered, my voice dry and shaking. The figure didn't answer. It just paused, then pulled back out of the tent without a word. "Dad?" I said again, louder this time, sitting up fully. Whoever it was backed away quickly, but didn't zip the tent shut behind them. Confused and a little annoyed, I crawled out of my sleeping bag and out of the tent into the night air. The clearing was bathed in moonlight, casting pale shadows through the trees. There was no one there, no sound, just the distant chirp of crickets and the occasional breeze rustling the leaves. I walked over to my parents' tent and unzipped it slowly, trying not to wake them too suddenly. I crawled in and whispered, "Dad?" He stirred in his sleeping bag and blinked at me. "Did you just check on us?" I asked, hoping he'd nod, hoping he'd say yes and laugh it off. But instead, he frowned. "No," he said, his voice groggy. "Why?" My chest tightened. I shook my mom gently. She blinked awake, rubbing her eyes. "Did you come to our tent just now?" She looked at me like I was dreaming. "No, honey. I've been here the whole time." Goosebumps swept over my arms. The realization hit hard. Someone, a stranger, had come into our camp, had unzipped our tent, peeked inside, and walked away without saying a word. And I had no idea who they were or why they were there. I think I said something, maybe tried to explain it all in a rush, but I don't remember how my parents reacted. I don't know if they believed me. Maybe they chalked it up to nerves. Maybe I never told them everything. But I remember me. I remember not sleeping, not even for a second. I lay awake the entire night, eyes wide, body trembling under my sleeping bag, listening to every sound in the forest, wondering if at any moment that zipper would come down again. And sometimes, even now, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't woken up. My parents were on their honeymoon in Key West when this happened. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, warm air, ocean breeze, and just the two of them. When they arrived at the hotel to check in, the clerk informed them that their assigned room was non-smoking. Since my dad smoked back then, they politely asked for a different room. The hotel staff made the change without any fuss, handed over a new key card, and they made their way to the elevator. As soon as they stepped out onto their new floor, they were hit with the sharp,
stinging scent of fresh paint. It was strong, unnaturally so, and clung to the air like humidity. The source wasn't hard to spot. Just down the hallway, a man in a white coverall was painting the wall. He had a full setup: rollers, trays, drop cloths, paint cans all neatly arranged around him. The whole area looked like an active, in-progress project. As my parents passed by, they greeted him casually, a simple "Hi there," and a nod. But the man didn't react. Not a glance, not a sound. Just continued painting in long, methodical strokes, back and forth, back and forth. It was a bit weird, but they shrugged it off and continued on to their room. When they opened the door, the smell of paint hit them even harder, overpowering. It was sharp and chemical and made their eyes water. There was no way they could stay in there, not even for a few minutes. So they turned around and went back to the front desk. They explained the situation, the unbearable paint fumes in the room, and the painter they'd passed in the hallway. The receptionist looked confused. She pulled something up on her computer and frowned. She said, "There's no scheduled paint job on that floor. Not today. Not this week, actually." That made them pause. Still, the staff member was helpful. She apologized and offered to switch their room again. They accepted. They went back upstairs to grab their luggage, and that's when things got really strange. The hallway, completely empty. The painter, gone. Supplies, drop cloths, everything, gone. Not a single trace left behind. Even the smell, that overwhelming, headache-inducing scent of fresh paint, was gone, like it had never been there at all. They looked at each other, unsettled, but didn't say much. Maybe the hotel staff had sent someone up to clean things up. Maybe they just imagined how strong the smell was. They tried to push it from their minds and headed to their new room. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, though neither of them slept very well. The next morning, on their way to breakfast, they passed through the lobby and overheard a tour guide speaking to a small group of visitors. They only caught part of the conversation, but their ears perked up when the guide mentioned the exact floor they had originally been placed on. A long time ago, a painter was working up there. No one knows exactly what happened, but he slipped while working near the elevator shaft, fell straight through, died instantly. Some guests say they still smell paint on that floor sometimes. Others claim to see someone painting late at night, even when no work is scheduled. My parents stopped in their tracks. They never told the tour guide what they'd experienced, but they didn't need to. Neither of them ever believed in ghosts, not really. And maybe, even now, they don't fully believe. But that moment, that hallway, that blank-faced painter, and the vanishing supplies, they couldn't explain it, and they still don't try to. All they know is that something was off. And to this day, they still get chills whenever they smell fresh paint in an empty hallway.
This didn't happen to me, but it happened to my cousin, Nikki. And even now, just thinking about it sends a chill straight down my spine. This story is real, all of it. It was a Friday night, sometime around 1 in the morning, and Nikki was on Skype with his girlfriend, Sam. They were just talking, messing around, nothing out of the ordinary. At some point during the call, she asked him to come over and spend the night. She said she missed him and the house was too quiet. But Nicky didn't really want to make the drive that late. He brushed it off, said he'd see her tomorrow. They kept talking, joking, laughing. That's when Nicky noticed something strange. The closet door behind Sam, it wasn't fully closed anymore. It was cracked open, just barely, like someone had gently pulled it and it hadn't quite latched. Nicky pointed it out. "Hey, your closet door's open." Sam turned around, looked at it for a second, then shrugged. "Huh, weird," she said. "Probably didn't close it all the way." They both moved on. Neither of them thought much of it. Another half hour passed, and then the closet creaked again, wider this time. Nicky leaned in closer to the screen, frowning. Are you sure your little brother's not hiding in there or something?" Sam laughed, shaking her head. "No, he's at my dad's tonight. I told you, I'm home alone." Nicky frowned. "Then maybe it's just a draft." "Yeah, the window's cracked. It's probably nothing." But Nicky couldn't stop watching the closet. Something about the way it slowly edged open, like someone was waiting for the right moment, kept him on edge. And then it happened. The door to the closet opened fully, and someone stepped out. A person. They didn't say a word. They just walked, calmly, right out of Sam's bedroom, disappearing from view of the webcam.
Nicky's heart dropped. His stomach twisted into a knot. He leaned in, panic in his voice. "Sam, your little brother's there. I just saw him come out of your closet." She stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I swear to God, Sam, someone just walked out of your closet. I saw it. Go check." She blinked, her face suddenly pale. "I told you, I'm home alone." The moment she said it, Nicky's blood ran cold. He sat up straight, his voice rising. "Sam, lock your door. Call the police, now. I'm coming over right now." On the screen, he saw her glance back toward the closet, fully open now. She stood up, walked slowly to her bedroom door, and as she reached for the lock, she screamed. A blood-curdling, raw scream that made Nicky's skin crawl. Then the screen shook violently as she slammed the door shut and locked it. The camera went crooked and pointed toward the ceiling. Nicky was already grabbing his keys. He was out the door in seconds, calling the police while speeding toward her house. He got there in record time. The front door was wide open. He burst inside, calling Sam's name, running straight for her room. The door was locked. He pounded on it. "It's me! Open up! Sam, open up!" No response, just silence. Moments later, the police arrived. They forced the door open, and what they found inside chilled them all. Sam was curled in the corner of her room, knees to her chest, shaking violently. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't move, just stared at the floor, eyes wide with shock. Later, when she was able to talk, she told the police exactly what had happened. She said that when she went to lock the door, just before she turned the latch, there was someone already standing there, right in front of her, face to face. Not a blur, not a shadow, a person, staring at her with wide, glassy eyes, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. She slammed the door shut in their face and locked it seconds before they could get inside. Whoever it was, whatever their plan had been, they were gone by the time the cops searched the house. No sign of forced entry, no fingerprints. No one saw anyone leave. To this day, no one knows who it was or how long they'd been hiding in that closet.
It was one of those dark, stormy nights, the kind I actually liked. The thunder was booming, the lightning flashing like a strobe across the sky, and I had the house all to myself. My dad was working the night shift like he usually did, so I was camped out in the living room, wrapped in a blanket and watching movies way later than I should have been. I had just finished watching Forrest Gump for what was probably the 100th time and figured that 2 a.m. was a good enough time to finally call it a night. The storm was still rumbling outside, but to me, it was comforting. I loved falling asleep to the sound of thunder and rain pounding against the roof. I turned off the TV, climbed into bed, and lay there, listening to the wind howling through the trees. Then, tap. A small noise at the window. It wasn't the usual patter of rain. It was sharper, deliberate. I paused, but tried to brush it off. Maybe a branch, the wind. But a few seconds later, tap. This time louder, more distinct, like a rock. My heart skipped. My eyes opened wide in the dark. That wasn't the wind. A third time, clack, right against the glass. I sat up, frozen, heart thumping in my chest. It couldn't be my dad. He would have called. He always did if something came up. I didn't want to look out the window. Whoever was out there had to know I was home. The TV had been lighting up the whole room before I shut it off. They would have seen it through the window. They'd know I was awake. I told myself to just ignore it. Maybe they'd give up and go away. But the tapping continued, louder, faster, more rocks, more intent. And then I heard it. The low, steady rumble of a truck engine down on the street. I hadn't noticed it before, drowned out by the storm, but now the rain was beginning to ease, and that engine felt close, too close. Then, thud, a loud, heavy knock against the window. That was enough. I threw off the covers and got out of bed, moving fast and quiet. I was heading for the phone downstairs to call the police. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat.
As I passed the front door on my way to the kitchen, I made the mistake of glancing up, just for a second. There was a face staring in through the glass at the top of the door. I stopped cold. A man, his face partially shadowed, was watching me from the other side. I couldn't see much, but I swear he was smiling. Not a friendly smile. A slow, unsettling grin. I tore into the kitchen, grabbed the cordless phone with shaking hands, and called the police. The dispatcher told me there was a patrol car nearby and someone would be there soon. Meanwhile, I heard the front doorknob jiggling, then rattling, then bang. He was trying to force it open. Bang! I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find, backed away from the door, and shouted, "I've called the police! They're on their way!" Still holding the knife, I ran back upstairs, bolted my bedroom door, and waited. Everything stopped. No more banging, no more tapping on the glass, no more rocks at the window. I didn't dare look outside, but I stood frozen by the door, straining to hear. Then came the sound of tires on wet pavement. That truck, it was driving off. I waited in silence, barely breathing. Minutes later, I heard a police siren wailing from down the street. A patrol car pulled up outside, and I finally allowed myself to breathe again. The doorbell rang. I practically flew downstairs. The officer took my statement. I described everything I could, the man's face, the smile, the sound of the truck. But I couldn't give much on the vehicle. I hadn't looked out the window. I still regret that.
They never caught anyone. No fingerprints, no license plate, nothing left behind. To this day, I don't know if he wanted to rob the house or if he had something far worse in mind. All I know is, if I hadn't gotten up when I did, maybe that smile would have been the last thing I ever saw.